Good morning. This is my presentation for the Research Foundations for Sports Leaders module at the University of Central Lancashire, module number TL4046. The title of this presentation is Critically Evaluate Recognised Research Methodologies and Their Potential for Informing Work-Based Practice. Over the course of this presentation, I'll be looking to answer these two learning outcomes. The first one being critically evaluate the methodological concepts in relation to practitioner research within the sports industry. And the second one being identify the strengths and weaknesses of these approaches as suitable positions for informing practice within a work-based setting. As part of this presentation, I will be looking at the main research paradigms that a researcher may use. Furthermore, in this presentation, within the paradigms, this presentation will identify the ontological position and the epistemological approach that they take. A strengths and weaknesses analysis will be undertaken regarding the methodologies and the different methodologies that can be used and how they associate themselves in each of the paradigms. And then a review of my workplace and further analysis of how the paradigms affect my workplace, which is the University of Bolton. This research will also identify what fits for a HE setting, higher education, and what may be more aligned to a different organisation. So this comes on to what is a paradigm. There are four main paradigms within research, the ones we actually look at, these being positivism, constructivism, post-positivism, and pragmatism. What is a research paradigm? Well, Kuhn in 1962 defined it as, quite simply, a research paradigm is a set of common beliefs and agreements shared between scientists about how problems should be understood and how they're addressed. Gubber in 1990 identifies that the research paradigms can be characterised or broken into the following area. Ontology. What is it? What is reality? Epistemology, how do you know something? And then furthermore, methodology, how do you go about finding something out? How do you go about actually doing that? So ontology and epistemology are very important. They allow us to view knowledge in a different way. In terms of how we as researchers view ourselves in relation to this newfound knowledge, furthermore, ontology and epistemology inform our methodological strategies and how we choose which method to use. Positivism. So the first of the paradigms. Positivists believe there is a single reality. There is nothing more to it, there is just one reality and that is it. Positivists are most likely to use quantitative research methods to undertake and measure outcomes, measured by the quantity of something. For example, the number of people partaking in activity would be quantitative research. We'll come on to qualitative research in the next couple of slides. So in this, you have the paradigm, positivism. The ontology to this, there is a single reality or truth to a situation. The epistemology to this, reality can be measured, and therefore the focus is reliable and valid tools to obtain that. The methodologies most used, or the methodological approaches most used, quantitative research, experimental research, and survey research. We'll come on to them in a little bit further into this presentation with some more strengths and weaknesses for that. The second one that I looked at was constructivism, also known as interpretivism. Constructivists believe there is no single reality or truth. Reality is created by individuals or groups. Researchers focus on the constructivist paradigm will be more likely to use qualitative research, that being the quality of data, as opposed to the number of times something has happened. So quantitative, looking at the quantity of things, looking at how many people have taken part in an activity. Qualitative, looking at the quality of the data that's put forward. So the paradigm in this, the ontology, was there was no single reality or truth to the situation. Reality is created by individuals or groups. The epistemology in this, reality therefore needs to be interpreted, used to understand the underlying meaning of events and activities. The different methodological approaches that you could use, or methodologies you could use: qualitative, action research, ethnography, and grounded theory. We'll come on to ethnography and grounded theory later on in this presentation. The third research paradigm, post-positivism, also known as critical realism. This was developed in the middle of the 20th century. Post-positivism recognises that the way scientists view the world and the way we view the world is not too distinctly different. It's very similar. Scientific reasoning and common sense reasoning are essentially the same process. Hacking and Creswell both not came up with post-positivism, but had views on this. Post-positivists believe that reality does exist. Unlike positivists that believe there is a single reality, post-positivism and post-positives believe there is more than one reality. It's constructed socially within groups, and reality is there, but it's imperfect. There is no single reality. There are lots of different situations that can cause different viewings on that. And like they say, it can change. Reality can change. We're looking at the paradigms, so ontology, realities that are socially constructed, and the reality exists but is imperfect, as I mentioned before. The epistemology, reality and knowledge are influenced within society and socially constructed. There is an objective truth within that. And then the methodology, or methodologies that are most associated with post-positivism, is critical discourse analysis, action research, ethnography, and focus groups. If we compare that back to positivism before, that was looking very much at quantitative research, experimental research, survey research, then we take it into post-positivism, where we're looking more at action research and ethnography. There is a big difference between the two. Finally, the final research paradigm I looked into was pragmatism. Pragmatists believe that reality is constantly renegotiated. Very similar to post-positivism, there is a change in reality, there is not one single reality. Pragmatists believe that it's negotiated regularly, debated, interpreted. Therefore, the best method used as it solves all the problems. Or it can also be seen as the cop-out. Pragmatists believe, or pragmatist is seen as, it's the easy way. It's already there. We believe it this way. It's the way to do it. So anything goes. Whatever you're hoping to discover will drive the research forward. So if you're trying to find out the best place to put a new sports facility, well, you can discover that by doing it. Find out where it is and then get the research. The ontology of pragmatism: reality is constantly renegotiated, debated, and interpreted. The epistemology: the best method is one that solves the problems. Finding out is the means of change and the underlying aim. And then the methodology that you can take in it: there is mixed methods, design-based research, and then looking back at action research as well. As mentioned in the learning outcomes, we're going to look at the ontological and the epistemological approaches to research. Well, Grix in 2010 stated, "Ontology is the starting point for all research, after which one's epistemological and methodological positions logically flow." It's really useful to start with ontology, because the ontology will build your research and develop a blueprint. And that will entail of what your research will entail and how you'll go about undertaking it. Once you've understood your ontological approach, your ontological position, you can then look at your epistemological approach. So epistemology is the study of the nature of knowledge, justification and belief. Epistemology focuses on the following key points and traits. There is a philosophical analysis of the nature of knowledge and how this relates to truth, justification and belief. There is a skepticism, the scope of sources of knowledge, and the validity of sources and knowledge. Is it valid? Is it useful? Once you as a researcher have decided your ontological position, this will lead you to what epistemological approach you may take. And in doing so, by understanding these 2 points, it will form your methodology. So once you understand those 2 areas, you can look at how your methodology will plan out. What is the method you're going to take to understand your research? Methodology is simply the way we undertake research. It's fueled by our ontological position and our epistemological approach. The chosen methodology includes the way in which a researcher gets information or data. So, as mentioned earlier in this presentation, I said that we were going to look into more detail of the different, or a selection of the different methodologies that could be used. Ethnography. Ethnography came up in both constructivism, interpretivism, and post-positivism. So it's a well-known methodology and one that's used quite regularly. So methodologies. What is ethnography? Well, ethnography can help investigate complicated or critical design challenges. Ethnographic research is qualitative research method where the researcher can observe and interact with group or participants. They can go into their real life environments, they can sit down, they can observe, they can see what's really happening. For example, observations in a learning environment could be seen as ethnographic research. This method allows researchers to fully understand a group of people. So in a teaching context, if I'm to be observed in my teaching practice, someone from my department or external to my department could come in and they could implement some ethnography in that. They can look at me in my natural environment. So the advantages. There's a range of information that can be collected through methods such as surveys, observations and interviews. Lots of different things can make up ethnography. Ethnography can help identify and analyse unexpected issues. And finally, can understand how people react in their own environment as opposed to an assessed piece of work, or maybe where they're not in there and they may feel uncomfortable. So it's putting them in their comfort zone, so to speak. A disadvantage, well, ethnography can be time consuming. It can take a lot of time to understand a certain subject. It can also take a lot of time to build the trust. So subjects, participants may also not act natural in these environments, even though we're sort of saying it's their comfort zone and that's the advantage. Whenever anyone's being observed or looked at, there's always an element of fear, maybe an element of uncomfortableness, and through that there could be that. This is why a longer study is needed, so that the observer or the researcher can get to know the participants, and the participants can understand and trust the researcher. Ethnography can lead to a cultural bias. Researchers can still be biased towards certain aspects of their own assumptions. So for an example, in my teaching practice, if someone from my teaching area came in and observed me, there could be a natural bias towards the way I teach because we're on the same team, as opposed to if someone came in from the Higher Education Academy or Advanced HE, or if you're in a school from Ofsted and understand it from there. The next methodology or methodological approach that I looked at was action research. Simply, action research is where the researcher looks for a solution to a problem through research. An intervention is put in place. The researcher can then analyse the impact, the effectiveness of that intervention, and then can make assumptions and develop their research from that. Also, action research can be things like action learning sets, where you collectively come together as a group and talk about issues and concerns, and instead of trying to you're teasing out answers from them as opposed to telling them the fix, you're trying to get them to understand it as well. In terms of use of action research within my setting, is very useful. We've implemented action learning sets quite a number of times within different things, within my own teaching, but also within our development as academics as well. And it can be successfully implemented in educational settings. The advantages to action research. Well, action research is suited to systems development and problem-solving methods. Has a high level of practical relevance and can be used with quantitative and qualitative data. It's not just restricted to one or the other. And finally, it can help to gain an in-depth knowledge about the problem at hand. Disadvantages, on the other hand, there's a difficulty in distinguishing between action and research and ensuring the application of both. So undertaking the research, undertaking the action, and how they link together. And there's a lack of repeatability and rigour within this, and this comes from some research that Bryman and Bell did in 2011. The next one that I looked at, or the final methodology that I looked at, was grounded theory. Grounded theory is a research method that allows the researcher to develop a theory that in turn offers an explanation about the main concern of a certain aspect and how that concern is resolved and processed. Glazer in Walsh, Holton et al. In 2015 defines grounded theory as simply the discovery of emerging patterns in data. Grounded theory is a process, and it relies on the researcher following a simple plan to ensure all stages are completed. The advantage of grounded theory is better at determining what actually happens. As a general theory, grounded theory accepts readily to studies of diverse phenomena. And finally, grounded theory can respond and change as conditions that affect behavioural change. Disadvantages, on the other hand, of grounded theory. Well, grounded theory methods produce large amounts of data. This can often be hundreds and thousands of different little bits of data that is very difficult to manage and interpret. Researchers also need to be skillful in the method of grounded theory. It's not as simple as just using action research that can be picked up by most people, or using quantitative or qualitative data. You have to understand grounded theory to implement it. And another disadvantage of grounded theory is there's no standard rules to follow for the identification of categories. It's kind of a free-fall, and that can cause a lot of issues. But it can also be an advantage in that you can define your rules and categories to how you need them. When we look at my workplace, so the University of Bolton. Within my workplace, I'm responsible for teaching and learning a small cohort of students studying on the Sports Development Coaching Bachelor of Arts Honours degree. That's across a 4-year programme, including a foundation year. It's really important to understand how research will aid and develop my own practice, indeed that of the students I'm teaching. I need to understand what research is to allow them to understand how to do it as well. I would argue that in education, the paradigm that would most align to me and to that industry would be that of positivism or critical realism. Education is about learning, developing knowledge. The ontological position aligns itself to the ability to understand there is no single reality or truth. Research allows us to develop that, but there is no single reality in sometimes. All the realities that are socially constructed are under constant change. It's important to remember that you can, as a researcher, be across more than one paradigm. Personally, I sit between positivism, a little bit of critical realism, and then, I'm not ashamed to say it, occasionally pragmatism. Because like you say, it is the cop-out way of doing it, but sometimes you need that quick research, and pragmatism lends itself to that. Pragmatism, I would argue, allows the researchers to identify changes and interpret this in a certain way, allowing for problem solving and analysis. In summary, it is very important to understand when undertaking a research project, however big, that you process and undertake certain tasks is important. Understanding the ontological position informs the epistemological approaches, and in turn allows you as the researcher to undertake and correct the most fitting research methodologies, finding the right one to fit your situation. There are a number of research paradigms that have been discussed. Everyone can be slightly different. It's important to remember researchers can cross into different paradigms. Like I said before, mine between pragmatism, positivism and critical realism. At different times I can sit in all of them. Each research methodology has a place, and it can be used to ensure the research is of high quality and is useful to the project you are completing. Thank you for listening. I'll be more than willing to accept any questions.